All right, good evening and welcome to the June 22nd, 2022 School Committee meeting. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and good evening. We have item number 3, approval of items by consensus. Approval of minutes, June 8th, 2022. Is there a motion? Thank you, Mrs. Plowman. Seconded by Mr. Fennelly. All in favor? David?
Yes.
All right. We have approval of disposal of OIT surplus equipment. Is there a motion? Mr. Smaha, seconded by Mr. Fennelly. All in favor?
Yes for me.
That's unanimous. Thank you. We have approval of disposal of surplus textbooks. Mr. Smaha, seconded by Mrs. Plowman. Is there a discussion? No, okay. All in favor? That's unanimous.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yep, it is unanimous now. All right. We have, did I get through that one? Okay. Warrant. No, one more. Dispose of surplus school items. Thank you. The West. Is there a motion? Thank you, Mr. Turner. Second by Mr. Smaha. All in favor?
Yes.
That's unanimous. We have warrants G42, 43, R44, 45, L98, 99, 100, 101, and FS 74, 75, and 76. Is there a motion? Thank you, Mr. Fennelly. Seconded by Mr. Smaha. All in favor?
Yes.
That's unanimous. CB 07 and 08. Thank you, Mr. Smaha. Seconded by Mr. Fennelly. All in favor?
Yes.
Unanimous. Payroll ending 6/22/2022. Mr. Smaha, seconded by Mr. Turner. All in favor? That's unanimous.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. It's definitely unanimous. Sorry, David. SPED 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, and 46. Thank you, Mr. Fennelly. Second by Mrs. Plowman. All in favor?
Yes.
That's unanimous. All right. Our next item of business is the superintendent's report. David, can you mute? Thanks.
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Bryson, and good evening, everyone. We have a couple of special guests this evening, and I'm sorry I didn't share this with you earlier, but we'd love to have you come up just for a moment. I'm going to put you on the spot. Mr. Ingram, if you want to come up quickly as well, too. But in the packet, there has been an awful lot of activity, as folks are aware, certainly around recent leadership searches throughout the district, and we are so fortunate to have two to introduce you to this evening. The other folks, unfortunately, weren't able to be here tonight, but I just wanted to take a moment and formally have the chance. I know many of you have met these folks along the way, but we have Dr. Diane Carrero here, who is the next North Intermediate School principal. Diane was here earlier today and has been previously working with Ms. McMiniman as the outgoing North principal. The full press release is in the packet for those in the community that might want to learn a little bit more about Dr. Carrero, but just a couple of highlights. She is coming to us from Middleton, Massachusetts. She's been in the current position as principal of Fuller Meadow School for the last 12 years. She has a long and extensive career in education with a lot of leadership experiences, in a number of different realms, including curriculum instruction, support specialist, math specialist, as well as, of course, a teacher. And so we're so fortunate to welcome here. Looking forward to her to take over officially, really in just a few days away. But good evening, and if you wanted to say a word or two.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Ms. McMiniman has been so gracious and helpful. I've spent some time a couple of weeks ago. I was able to be at third grade move-up day. I spent some time today. I want to learn everything I need to know for next Friday. But she's been really great, and I'm excited to be here, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity.
Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for being here.
And alongside Diane is a face that many in the community may certainly well be aware. Dennis Ingram is here tonight, and I'm pleased to introduce Dennis officially. And there's again, in the packet, there's a write-up for those in the community that may be interested in learning more Mr. Ingram will be serving and stepping into the role effective July 1st as the interim director of athletics in Wilmington. Mr. Ingram has been here in Wilmington, in the Wilmington community for some time, and he has certainly an awful lot of experience within the athletic realm here in Wilmington, including serving as a longtime basketball coach. He's been heavily involved in the summer programming here in the district. Based upon the announcement and the timeline of Ms. Muzio, who is our current AD, as you know, and is stepping down to take another position in a nearby district. And I'll take this opportunity to wish her well. We thank her for her leadership during some tumultuous times when she came on board a couple of years ago as we entered the pandemic. But based upon the timing, I made the decision to move forward with an interim for next year, and so this will be for the entire school year. And as we get into next year, we'll certainly assess how we move forward from there. But Dennis is kind enough to step forward. We pulled together a small search committee. The list of those members are listed on the memo that you'll see in the packet. I want to thank them for their involvement and their time in helping participate in this, and we're so excited to have Dennis join us. So welcome officially.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to meet all of you. I'm very excited for the opportunity.
Thank you. Welcome. It's been exciting to see the Wildcats Clinic started, I think, yesterday? No, Monday. Tuesday. And I was picking my daughter up, and I see the basketball, and it makes me so excited to see the high school as this hub of all of these activities for such a wide range of kids. So it looked really great, looked organized, everyone looked like they were having a great time. So in addition to this, thank you for your leadership of those clinics. I know as a parent, I've thoroughly enjoyed them over the years, so
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. You don't have to say
Thank you.
that.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
In the packet, unfortunately not with us this evening though, but in the packet are two other memos as we really bring to a close our leadership searches in terms of those known at this point in time. Stacy Scott's announcement is in here, and Ms. Scott will be joining us as the next principal of the Woburn Street School. She also will be taking over on July 1st. She comes to us also with a wide range of experience, and we had the pleasure to meet her through the search process. She's currently serving in the Malden Public Schools and as assistant principal of approximately 500 students coming from a much larger school. But we're excited to have her join us at the Woburn Street. She has already been here, I know, at least on one full day last week to see the school in action and to get to meet staff. So we're excited for her arrival. And also in the packet, a note about the next elementary literacy coordinator, who is Miss Melissa Betancourt. I'm pleased to announce her appointment. She will be beginning in the district again formally on July 1st. She has an extensive array of experience with 11 years as a literacy coordinator, as well as 6 years of experience as a classroom teacher before that. And she comes to us also from Middleton. And she'll be starting very soon. And thank you to Miss Elliott, who really spearheaded that search, working with also a number of our staff throughout the district to participate in that search. Moving on to last couple of items in the packet. Item E, School Council Improvement Planning. I put together a brief memo just to share with the committee and the community my thoughts around how we resume our school councils and specifically improvement planning. As I hope this committee knows, I think that this is one of the most important things that our parents, guardian, caregiver volunteers at the school level can do in terms of their participation in working with the principal on developing an improvement plan. It's more than just the fact that improvement plans are required under Massachusetts general law, which they are, but it's more about, to me, coming together with administration, staff, and our parent, guardian, and caregiver volunteers to help formulate what seems to be of most importance to help move that school community forward. The fact is that we have an awful lot of data that has been gathered very recently throughout the course of the last number of months. And just a quick highlight of some of that data that's outlined in the memo there, from universal screening data to panorama data, an array of academic data through Ms. Elliott's office. And so it really seems to me that it would be ideal to allow our school principals, and especially our incoming principals, the chance to review that data over the course of the coming months and then in turn work with their school councils to put together an improvement plan that would be for next school year, and something that I would ask to get, for them to get me in the fall. So I just wanted to take this opportunity and share with you my thinking around that. I know that's been a question on some committee members' minds. Middle school student advisory program update. Not that long ago, you'll recall in here, we obviously had an extensive report around the middle school program review, and I just wanted to share with you as a committee and members of the community who are interested in sort of what's next for that. I'm so pleased to be able to share with you that we've got right out of the gate with one of the first important initiatives, and that's working on the commencement of planning for student advisory program. In fact, both yesterday as well as today, 4 teachers, Ms. Simmons, Ms. Morsina, Ms. Smith, and Ms. Jackson, all from the middle school. They met yesterday, they met also today, and I had the chance to go over and see them in person, along with Katie Powell from the Association of Middle Level Education. Ms. Powell is here to help support the development of our program, using our teachers as true teacher leaders in this work, and so much more to come in that, but that work has started and underway, and that's really exciting as we head into the summer and look forward to what that will be as a new addition to the middle school. And finally, in your packet, summer 2022 meals update, and I have myself to get to that, but my apologies. Where is it here? This is an update of information from Ms. Palin, and there are some things that are certainly underway right now at the state level and arguably federally as it relates to food services. There's been an awful lot of changes going into and throughout the pandemic, as you might be certainly aware, related to meals and having coverage of meals provided through governmental assistance. The legislation, as I understand it right now, unless there's been something that has emerged in the last couple of days that I'm not aware, there is legislation at both the federal and state level right now requesting that meals continue to be free for all children during educational days, but that still, as we understand it, is up in the air. And as you can see, the memo also provides an overview of the costs for meals going forward. So with all of that, I'm happy to take questions or comments if members of the committee have, but that concludes my report.
Awesome, thank you so much. Are there questions or comments? Mr. Smaha?
Hey, my question is about the middle school advisory program. Is the idea that these teachers met with AMLE over the past 2 days, and that it's going to be, do they have a plan for implementation for next school year, or is that just the beginning of the process, or like where are we in that process?
So it's the kickoff of the planning process for sure, and they are working to formulate what that structure will look like, including sort of how they're structured, which staff will be involved, the topics, when in the schedule, all of those. I mean, some things are more nuts and bolts, others are far more than that in terms of planning for training and professional development for staff, all of those things. So today really just marks the beginning of that planning, with certainly a lot more to come. Dr. Quirk, Mr. Faircloth today was a part of that planning, so certainly the school administration is involved with this and will be there to support the program, but really the idea here is we've got 4 teachers who are committed to this. They've stepped forward and are going to play a key role in helping develop the program for here. So the full intention is to have a program in place for the fall, but there'll be a lot of work to come. I mean, having myself been involved in planning, it's a big endeavor. So for families watching, I wouldn't want you to sort of stay by an email and think that something's going to be forthcoming in the next short period of time. It won't be. It'll be closer to the beginning of school, I suspect, when information starts to be rolled out.
I just want to commend the decision to include these teachers here. I'm really happy to see these teachers being committed to it as well. It's great when you get teachers being the leaders leading it. That can be the most impactful, I think.
Thanks.
I just wanted to second that, how much I appreciate them stepping forward and taking on this. That's fantastic.
Other questions or comments? All right. Our next item of business is public comment. We have one person signed up for public comment. Mr. Cohen, please state your name and address. Sorry to steal your thunder, David.
Jeffrey Cohen, 18 Cobalt Street in Wilmington. Good evening. This committee has been actively promoting twisted gender ideology by allowing books into our school library, allowing inappropriate posters to be displayed, and promoting a so-called wellness fair where several LGBTQ groups were in attendance. This committee must know that gender dysphoria is a medical condition that requires treatment from the medical community, not promotion by a school board. This warped ideology until recently did not exist, and now it's exclusively being promoted to the most vulnerable population, children. Who gave you the authority to impose your own views on gender on someone else's child? Did you know that there was strong evidence that suicides among young people may have increased significantly since 2010 in states that have relaxed medical policies with puberty blockers? Gender dysphoria has no observable diagnostic criteria. I do have the source document if you need that. I know how important inclusion is to this committee. So it's so important that inclusion is part of the 4 pillars of our school's strategic plan. Towards that end, out of the goodness of my heart, I purchased this book, an incredibly important book, an inclusive titled Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters. I plan on donating this book to our school library so students can feel inclusive about being able to read books that don't just gloss over the dangerous path that gender transition presents. This book chronicles the enormous challenges and irreversible damage that many who have attempted this transformation have experienced. I plan on submitting a formal request to this committee to donate this important book as a critical resource to all students. This committee recently denied school choice, the ability of Wilmington students to choose which school district they want to attend. Why was this decision made? Was it because our schools are in turmoil? This committee should consider reversing that decision to allow parents to choose whether they want their child indoctrinated or educated. There should also be an option for state-funded education savings account, or ESAs, that if implemented would allow parents to customize their child's education. Parents could remove their child from government education and send them to private schools under this plan. Lastly, this committee should consider severing ties with the woke National School Board Association like 25 states have already done. The NSBA is the entity that urged the Justice Department to investigate concerned parents as domestic terrorists. We all know that could not be further from the truth. Concerned parents are not terrorists. They are extremely concerned about that their children are no longer being educated in government schools. They are being indoctrinated. Concerned parents have a right to voice their opinions, and I urge all parents to let their voices be heard by attending and speaking up at the next school committee meeting in 2 weeks. Concerned parents, stop all woke ideology in schools, including gender ideology, social and emotional learning, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. I urge you to implement this before the next school year. Thank you.
Are there any other public comments? All right, thank you. Before moving on to new business, I just want to make sure that, well, we typically don't respond to public comments, but I am just concerned for the community that there might be some misunderstanding about school choice. Dr. Brand, could you just address that
Sure.
for community members? Thank you.
Certainly. Just as a reminder, the Interdistrict School Choice Program falls under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 76. It's been in place in Massachusetts since the early 90s. School choice allows families to enroll their children in a school district other than the district in which the children or the child lives. It is presumed that all school districts in Massachusetts will participate in and admit non-resident students through the school choice program unless the local school committee holds a public hearing and votes to withdraw from the school choice program. This committee did hold a public hearing back in the spring, and they held a meeting on April 27th specifically to vote to withdraw from participation in the school choice program. What that means is that this committee's action voted to hold on allowing or admitting any students from any other town to join the Wilmington Public Schools. This action does not in any way prevent any Wilmington family from seeking to enroll their child in a neighboring school district that might participate in school choice. Most of the districts are, there are a handful of districts that do participate in school choice nearby us. There are certainly many that do not either, but just to clarify, the school committee did not vote to deny school choice for Wilmington students or families.
Thank you. Our next item of business is new business. We have item A, the RTI universal screening data. We have Ms. Levesque with us too.
Good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
So I'm presenting here this evening with Michelle Levesque, who is our K-5 STEM coordinator. And she's been my right hand in this process all year long. So we're happy to be here to present to you. Last July, I was here talking about the plan for what we would undertake this year regarding universal screening data meetings. And so I provided a mid-year update, I believe, to the committee. And so now we're excited to be able to really share with you how that process went, the data that we collected over the course of the year, and what our next steps are. So you saw this slide last July, which was really mapping out what our plan was for the year. And so just to really reorient you to what this is showing is if you look across at the 3 dark blue columns, that is our universal screening window for all of our K-5 students. So we had these 3 universal screening periods, fall, winter, and spring. And then we had, after that screening period, we would meet as a team to hold a data meeting to look at all of that data. We developed intervention cycles. Students received intervention support, and I'll explain more of it in detail as we go. But we checked in to make sure students were making progress based on the interventions we developed. We'd run another intervention cycle. We'd come together again and have a universal screening, and this would repeat throughout the course of the year. So we were talking about students pretty much every 6 to 8 weeks, checking in on progress in both reading and math through this process. So thinking about what the overview is, right? We talked about these data meetings. So we would run our assessments. We'd have all this data. We brought groups of educators in the room together to have these conversations about what this data means. So the data meeting, the full data meeting, would fall after a universal screening period where we had our data from K-5 students, from everybody. In that room would be the grade level team. So for example, if it was a second grade, we'd have all of the second grade teachers, special education teacher that works with that team, the reading specialist that works with that team, our gen ed tutors that are supporting grade 2, the principal, the STEM coordinator, Michelle. Typically it would be a literacy coordinator, but we've been in transition this year. But that will happen next year, and myself. And so all of us would be in the room together, and we would have all of this data. And our primary goal was really to identify who were the students that needed additional support beyond our core instruction. So we had collaborative data-driven discussions that would really allow us to evaluate all of the data available to us. But it was really important to us to have that conversation with the teachers' input rather than simply looking at spreadsheets and looking at test results. Because the first question we always asked is, how is the child doing in your classroom? We can see the data points, but what's actually happening every day in your classroom? Does this data reflect what you're seeing for student progress? So we would have those conversations, and that was really a great dialogue. And what came out of having everybody in the room together was a couple of things. One, a broader perspective. Oftentimes you're only looking at the students in your class and what your needs are, and you don't necessarily see the larger picture of the grade level as a whole. So that was really helpful, I think, and really promoted some great conversation. It also allowed for colleagues to share ideas with each other about things that they're doing that does work, and sort of open doors, because in education there's lots of closed classrooms, door to door, nobody really sees what everybody else is doing. So it really allowed us to have that time carved out for this dialogue that often happens in the teacher's room or running down the hallway or those kinds of on-the-fly conversations. So during those meetings, as we talked about students and what their needs were, we identified specifically in reading and math what relative weaknesses there were or deficit areas, and we developed an intervention plan. And every student who was either coded just our color coding system, we called students pink if they were getting tier 2 intervention from somebody else beyond typical good differentiated classroom instruction. So typically a student who was pink was getting support from the reading specialist or the gen ed math tutor. And we called students yellow if they were identified as, faring pretty well in the core classroom instruction tier 1. However, they needed maybe something more beyond, they needed a little bit more differentiation. They needed additional check-ins here and there with a teacher, with a small group targeted intervention. So, and that was done through the classroom teacher. So that is basically what that whole group data meeting looked like after each of those universal screening periods. And then, as I mentioned earlier, when we had progress meetings, those were a little bit different. So instead of having the entire team together at a progress meeting, this was the one teacher. So Mrs. Jones, for example, would come and have a scheduled time on the calendar to meet with the reading specialist, the tutor, the principal, Michelle, myself, to really talk about, okay, so in the last 6 weeks, here's what the intervention was. How is it working? What's the progress data, monitoring data showing us? Is this intervention working? Is it closing the gap? Do we need to change it? Do we need a different grouping? Do we need different instructional approach, different materials? We had all of those conversations, and it was very targeted and specific to each of these student needs. So overall, the same goal, ultimately, to identify what the student needs were and to meet those and revise as needed. So those are just to give you some background around what those conversations were like that we held. But we want to share with you the results from this year. Michelle will start to talk a little bit about the math assessment. And just as a reminder, the math, this was new, very new for us, having any type of intervention and universal screening for math. And we did use the ESSER funds to employ 5 new math gen ed tutors this year to really help make this a success. So I'll turn it over to you, Michelle, to talk a little bit about that.
Okay.
I'll let you steer it. The right one, yep.
Okay. So for kindergarten and grades 1 through 5, we use 2 different SAVIS assessments. For kindergarten, we used the progress monitoring assessment because it was not computer-based and could be administered whole class. And for grades 1 through 5, we used the SAVIS math screener and diagnostic assessment, the MSDA. That was online-based. At the very beginning of the year, students had to complete a screener, which gave us an overview of the previous grade level skills, and then they took a diagnostic based on the results of the screener, which gave us a bigger, broader idea of where they're currently at based on grade level standards. So both assessments covered the full year of curriculum and allowed us to see growth over the course of the year. And as Christine mentioned earlier, we know this was only one data point for us when we were talking about it during our progress meetings, but it was certainly a very helpful one for us to kind of continue to go back to over the course of the year. So as Christine mentioned, we had general ed math tutors this year, which was essential for us to do what we did through this process. So previously, we've had 2 FTE general tutors that were kind of split between the 6 elementary schools, utilized in different ways over the last few years. So we took those 2 FTE positions. The ESSER funds provided us with another 5 positions. So we had 7 FTE positions this year. And that was crucial for us to be able to provide the math interventions. They worked specifically with the students who were considered tier 2 for math, and they serviced over 194 students K through 5 over the course of this year. And through that process, we also were able to identify an additional 238 students that received additional targeted instruction from their classroom teacher as well. So those gen ed tutors worked very hard this year supporting all of those students, and it was, without them, we wouldn't have been able to provide the tier 2 math intervention the way that we did, so that was super helpful. So the next few slides go through grade level results of the assessments from both sides of town. We combined it for the district. The MSDA, when student data is reported out, it's reported for each domain, such as like counting and cardinality, measurement, geometry, number sense. It breaks it down by domain, and then it also gives an overall MSDA score. And then it gives a performance level of does not meet, approaching, meets, or exceeds. The kindergarten data doesn't give the performance level, but we were able to use the same benchmark percentages to give those performance levels. And you'll notice that for kindergarten, they only had winter and spring. They did not do a fall benchmark math assessment due to the literacy screenings, which were super heavy in the fall for the kindergartners. So for kindergarten, as you can see, in the winter, 67% of kindergarten students were meeting or exceeding the expectations, and by spring, that moved up to 90%. And in grade 1, they had similar trends, 46% of students meeting or exceeding in the fall, 75% in the winter, and 91% of the first graders meeting or exceeding this spring. In second grade, again, you can still see the same trends. 48% were meeting or exceeding in the fall, 76% in the winter, 90% in the spring. Third grade, they had 55% of students meeting or exceeding in the fall, 79% in the winter, and 96% of the district's third graders were meeting or exceeding this past spring. And in grades 4 and 5 at the intermediate level, same thing, 40% of students were meeting or exceeding in the fall, 75% in the winter, 90% in the spring. And fifth grade had 40% in the fall, 73% in the winter, and 85% in the spring. So district-wide, when you take grades 1 through 5, you don't include kindergarten, in the fall, less than 50% of our elementary students were meeting or exceeding the benchmark, but by the end of this year, 90% of our students were meeting or exceeding the math benchmark through the MSDA process. So what this has shown us is exactly what we want to see, right? We want to see the does not meet and approaching continue to go down, and meets and exceed continue to go up. So you see that staircase doing exactly what we hope for it to be doing. And again, that's, certainly to credit the teachers and the instruction that's happening in the classroom with the curriculum that we have that's carrying our students along and having them meet those expectations by the end of the year.
All right, and I'll jump into the reading data. So in a similar way, we have our universal reading assessments for grades K to 2 we use this year. In the past, we had used just Ames Web for kindergarten. We expanded it to grade 2 this year. So grade K through 2, Ames Web Early Literacy Screener, which includes added subtest, RAN, and the Shaywitz Dyslexia Screener as well. And we also administered the benchmark assessment system, the BAS, to grades K to 2, and grade 3 to 5 also administered the BAS. In addition, I wanted to point out that those are our universal screening tools, but as I mentioned, when we come together for data meetings, particularly for any student who is receiving support, usually that's just the first, the universal screening data is our first brushstroke, if you will, and then as soon as those students are identified, we are jumping into many other screeners to really dig deep to help inform that intervention plan, to know specifically what it is that student needs. So I just listed a few that many of our reading specialists have used this year to help really dig deep and figure out what students might need. And so the data that I'm sharing with you here is, I'll explain what you're looking at here on the screen. This is kindergarten. On the left-hand side, I wasn't able to pull the data grade level. I'm sure there's a way to pull the Ames Web data grade level. I just couldn't figure that out last week when I was putting this together. But I do think it's also helpful. You can see it by school here. And so what you're looking at in this tiered transition is fall, winter, spring, moving across. So, and the green is considered Tier 1, yellow is considered their version of Tier 2, and red is Tier 3. So really, it's just progressive needs, obviously. The red is the highest need students, yellow is, similar to that approaching, and the green is students who are successful in the core curriculum Tier 1. So as we look across, our goal, similar to what Michelle talked about, is decreasing, increasing our green and decreasing our yellow and red. And I know on the screen here, it's hard to see all the logistics, the numbers, but you can obviously see that just from the colors alone, the trend is definitely going in the right direction. This was really exciting to me to see this kindergarten data. I think it really speaks to the fact that this was a pretty typical year for kindergartners, right? So that's exciting to see where these students are, what this year has, what they've been able to accomplish this year in a typical school year, as normal as they've ever known, right? To the right, you'll see a chart that is the BAS scores for kindergarten. And again, as Michelle said, this is winter and spring, similar to the math. We don't administer the BAS in the fall. We did the Ames Web in the fall. So here, I separated out the green and blue, the blue being exceeding our benchmark and the green being meeting the benchmark, and yellow approaching, and red below benchmark. So you can see in the fall, our numbers, kindergarten across the board, and then moving down into the spring and the significant growth you've seen here. So, just to talk about the fact that Ames Web is really, at the early literacy level, is really specific skills and subtests where the BAS is actually asking students to put all those skills together and apply them. So you often see discrepancies between the two. So I think it's really helpful to see both at the early literacy level, but it's exciting to see that, for so many kids, those isolated skills are carrying over into actual reading.
Just to ask a quick question as you're going through it, so I can orient to this. On the BAS scores, are those numbers students?
Yes.
Those are not the percentages,
Correct.
right?
Those are the number of
Individual
students. Yes.
And then the Tier 3 services, are those students receiving special education services or not necessarily?
Okay, so on the chart on the left,
Yeah.
so all of our students, including students on IEPs, participate in this assessment.
Okay.
So they may account for, those students are accounted for, unless there is a specific reason why that special education liaison feels it would be detrimental for the student to participate. They are part of this data pool. So those students, many of them may already have plans in place that are supporting them, but that data is all inclusive here. So they may be, for us, for this process, the difference really, and this was our first year, so we're still trying to figure out what makes the most sense, but the difference between Tier 2 and Tier 3 in our general ed program is a level of intensity, right? Frequency, oftentimes if a student is not making the gains through that Tier 2, and when we have those progress meetings, we're saying, we're not closing the gap, let's move them, let's increase the intensity, let's put them in a one-on-one situation with the reading specialist instead of a small group. And so for us, it's really kind of shifting that intensity of the service. But it's, so we're not looking at Tier 3 necessarily as automatic special education. For grade 1, similar. I will say that based on my observation, I think our grade 1 students, probably out of all of our grade levels, took the greatest, or had the greatest impact academically from the pandemic year. And, we are certainly making up a lot of lost ground. But you can see the numbers. Look at just coming in the red where they came in the fall. It was definitely a big difference compared to where our kindergartners were coming in. As you know, it's a huge year, right? Just having those foundational skills that they need to be able to get there. Our first grade, all of our teachers are working hard, but our first grade teachers, some of the conversations we had in the beginning of the year is, wow, I have a whole new appreciation for kindergarten teachers because now we are kindergarten teachers and first grade teachers. So that was a big, kids were still learning how to be a student and be in school and all of those things, and also trying to get the academics. So we've made significant progress. This data is really helpful for us now in planning and thinking about what our supports look like for grade 2 next year, knowing that we have another year of opportunity to really hone in on what these students need as second graders to close that gap and make sure everybody has the supports they need to get where they need to go. So that allows us to really look at our staffing. In many of the schools, we're fortunate to have multiple reading specialists at Shawshene and Woburn Street, and they often take on the role of I'll focus on first grade, you focus on second grade. That will look different next year. I mean, they're flexible and they've made adjustments as needed, but we'll definitely need to make sure we have the most support for our grade 2 students in those buildings to make sure their needs are met. So again, you can see, still made a lot of gains, but there's definitely work to be done there. Grade 2, you can see this is looking pretty positive overall. Again, came in, with definite similarities in the tier 1, but has made significant progress across for the BAS, the exceeding and on benchmark are definitely in a good place. So that's good news. We'll continue to support those students as well into 3rd grade. And this is grades 3 and 4, and as I mentioned, they don't do the Ames Web currently in grades 3 and 4. The BAS is our primary tool that we're using right now as our universal screener. We've had some conversations around that, gathered some feedback from teachers. We've been really, some feel like we should have another data point. And honestly, the conversation that we've had about that this year is the primary goal was to get these conversations happening. And this document of this data is just a starting point for us. So it's finding the right balance between administering, providing time for instruction and assessment and finding that right balance. So those are conversations we're still having, but any student who is identifying as having some struggles in class, we are doing additional assessments on those students once they are identified. So it's not necessarily universal, but they are getting a different battery of assessments as well. So you can see here similar progress. 4th grade had a little bit of a slower, there's a few more students in red that will support next year. But overall, they made some great gains. And then this slide is looking at 5th grade scores and then K-5 as a whole. So 5th grade is another area that we are really going to focus in on, and we've developed a plan for some of the conversations we had were really around not seeing as many students moving into the exceeding or on benchmark as we would anticipate. So working with that team, we really identified specific curriculum issues that we want to address, and we've already begun to schedule professional development really on small group strategy instruction, things that we can really do to target those supports. We also have identified a great need for additional intervention materials in grades 4 and 5, so we'll be looking at getting additional materials so that they have access, easy access, to be able to provide intervention in a explicit, targeted way in a short amount of time. So that's what we're focusing on. And the district overall, you can see just the numbers compiled to give you that sense. So overall, we gathered, Michelle and I surveyed the teachers about this process. We really wanted to get a sense. All along, we've said this is a work in progress. We want your feedback. This will be ever evolving. So we asked teachers on a scale of 1 to 5, how did they feel about this process this year? So overall, you can see that a strong majority felt that it was gave it a 4 or a 5, if you will. So they felt that it was really valuable and productive. And then we also took some samples comments. Michelle, do you want to speak to this slide a little bit?
Sure. So one of the questions that we asked was what worked well with the universal screening and data meeting process this year. And so this is just a snapshot of the responses, but overall we know that staff and teachers really felt like the process was valuable and they appreciated the time to collaborate with their colleagues. The one quote I think that kind of summed it up well was, being able to meet as a team and bounce ideas and data off of each other was really nice. I enjoyed sitting down and meeting formally about students with concerns. It was a nice way to feel heard. It also kept me accountable on keeping up with interventions in the classroom. The screeners were a nice way to see the students progress as an individual, as a school, and as a nation. So one of the things in math, we were able to take national percentiles as well when we were looking at the MSDA data, so that they could see their individual students within their class, the grade level as a whole, and then also nationally where their students fell, to give that bigger picture. So this year was a challenging year, maybe a little bit easier in some ways than the previous years, but our teachers, our tutors, the support staff that we've had really worked hard this year to rework instruction and what teaching looks like and feels like, especially with this MTSS process that we've been going through. And so these data meetings, I really feel like, gave teachers the voice that has kind of been missing for a while. They felt valued, they felt like they were being treated professionally, and that we could have these conversations collaboratively as a team. So I think that was really great. I think there's a lot that we learned from this year, a lot that we know we can move forward with. But overall, I think it was a positive experience for teachers.
And so with that segue of what we can move forward with, the other question we asked was, having lived through this process for a year now, what resources, materials, or PD would be helpful for you moving forward? So these were just these were the most common comments from this section, but really they identified that, specifically what kind of professional development they need. They really want small group strategy instruction, knowing that that's really where they're going to get the most bang for their buck, if you will, time spent well with students. They're looking for time to create intervention materials and create them as a team and share them, build a bank library of them. They're looking for, more decodable reading books. So we've really changed how we're providing intervention, especially at the younger grades, and want to make sure we have the resources and materials to support what they need moving forward. So I was excited to see what they really generated as what they need next, because I think it's a great problem to have, and in a way that, okay, now we know what we need, and there's a sense of urgency around moving forward with all of this, so it allows us to know exactly how to support them moving forward to continue to do this work. So it's been exciting. Overall, I would just say that this process has been, as Michelle said, just such a good collaborative, community building process in it. So that was a nice side effect, I think, from all of the other work. But the teams really worked so well together. They worked hard, and it was just a really good, we spent a lot of time, how many days was it? I don't know, 60 days or something in these full day data meetings with the teachers, but it was time well spent. And and I think it felt like a community. So. Well, there are two sides of town, and there's a lot of grade levels, and each one had at least three, sometimes up to 5 meetings a year, so it was a lot of days. So I'm very excited that we'll be bringing on a new literacy coordinator to help with this process for next year. So, but we're happy to take questions.
One more. You do have one more slide for next steps.
Oh, sorry. Oh, thank you.
Oh, I just didn't want you to
thank you.
sad later that you forgot. Yeah.
So Michelle has put together a full calendar for next year of all the data meetings for all the principals. It's exciting, to have all of these dates ready to go. So we have that plan. We just need to disseminate that. We need all our new principals to be officially on board so that they can have the schedule as well. And we're going to continue to work on building those intervention libraries for both reading and math. We've already started to schedule PD that's come out of what the teachers need. Michelle had talked a little bit about specifically for math, but we always do for ELA as well. But now that the math assessment is new, the diagnostic, really looking at when our MCAS data comes in, doing some analysis to look at both to see if what we're seeing in our universal screening tools matches MCAS. And we've already started, it's been fascinating looking at the data, because not only does it help us support students individually with their needs, but it lets us look at our curriculum overall. And for example, in math, we noticed measurement was popping up. Even with students who were exceeding across the board, measurement was popping up as an area that was weak for a few students. So we started to really dig deep into, all right, what does that measurement lesson, what do those lessons look like? How many days? Is there a way we can bring that earlier in the year and spread out more of a hands-on practical application of measurement through a project throughout the course of the year, so that it's not just a couple lessons in whatever month. So it's giving us that kind of level of conversation that we're able to have. And then, again, you know, we just shared a couple of the questions from the survey, but there was lots of different feedback pieces that we got from the staff around scheduling and what forms we use and the structure of those data meetings. So we'll be looking at making some revisions based on all of that data for the start of the school year. So that's my last slide, I think. Yes. Thank you, Jen.
I'm going to go first just because I think I might cry. I am just, you know, I mean, how passionately you feel about data. And every time I walk in the Roman house and you're talking about the meetings and I'm like, oh my gosh, we've been waiting so long for this, like, I'll call it passion, but like obsession, but I love it. Like, I'm so thrilled. And I cannot tell you just how grateful we are for your leadership and this is obviously so essential now because of, you know, the pandemic and really catching. And I think if, you know, parents are listening or community members, this is unbelievable. I mean, this work that you've done in this year is truly transformative. And I know it's hard to see, like if you're not in those spaces, but those of us who do this work with those data points and then bringing it right back to those assessment, bringing it right back to the instruction. I mean, this is a huge move forward for our district. And so if it wasn't like super cheesy, I would give you a standing ovation. That's not my right now. So I just, thank you. And we're so excited to see what comes next. And I do have questions, but I'm gonna stop there, so. Stephen.
So thank you very much. I agree with everything, but the question I had was on the summer. And with the three different tiers, Tier 2 and Tier 1, the additional support and the supplemental support, and then the standard support that a child receives, will there be a way to look at the data in the fall and see how sticky Tier 1 was, or Tier 2 was, or the standard support, so that you can learn from it to maybe modify how you provide those so that the summer drop-off isn't quite as, it's natural, but if we can smooth out that a little bit, then the progress each year can be quicker.
Yeah, we actually, at our last data meeting, what we did was really talk about priority students that we wanted to look at. Who do we need to check in with immediately when we return in the fall? Which students, so we kind of color-coded them. Which ones do we want to just have on a watch that they're okay, they're at benchmark right now, but we're worried about summer regression. So we'll be having those, all those students will go through the universal screening again in the fall, but we'll be able to check in with those classroom teachers early on. All of this data will carry over and will be shared at the next year's data meetings. So, and we also have it, much of the same data in our rising student data sheets that we send on to the teachers with a lot of the same information. But really key is it's more the conversation that we have in those meetings as opposed to, it's really, so we talked about many of the teachers that were worried about students who might have some regression over the summer have already made specific packets or things that they wanted to send home to their students, with their students, and had conversations with parents about, your child's on benchmark, however, please work with them, and reading over the summer, we don't want them to slide. So we definitely are having those conversations. And as we're providing interventions, if they're not, I mean, some interventions are very effective for some students, but not for others. But it's helping us to really refine what is working and what is not. So we're, it's sort of adjusting as we go.
Awesome. And as she said, the data helps you do all of it. Okay, perfect, thank you.
Jen read my mind, but I just think that the support that you're offering teachers, you're not just saying, take this data and then support your students. I love the layers and layers of guidance and this sort of teaming approach so that teachers aren't feeling, I'm sure they're a little overwhelmed, but it's so nice to have all of that extra support for them. I guess where I am the most concerned was that 5th grade group. and both in math and reading. They were sort of the red flag for me when I looked at that data too. But what about when they transition to middle school? And what about all of those, you know, do we have plans? Are we able to follow this same model at the next level?
So we have planted those seeds, and so all of the student data has been shared with the middle school already with specific student names and who to watch and who to, you know, there are some structures already in place for reading support and math support at the 6th grade as they enter. It doesn't look like this right now, but there are some other structures in place. It's part of the recommendation that came out of Dr. Brand's work with the middle school program review as well to talk about figuring out that plan for tiered interventions. However, with that said, I already have a date on the calendar with the 6th grade ELA teachers as a start and the reading specialist, along with Mia Parviainen and Dr. Quirk, to sit down and have a data meeting on all of these students in reading, at least to start. And you know, they have been noticing, you know, over the last couple of years with the pandemic, the students coming to them have had greater needs in the area of reading. So they said, you know, we need some support, we need some help. So we will start by doing that data meeting with the 6th grade team, looking at those student needs, working on figuring out ways to differentiate for those students in the classroom with the reading specialist support as well, to really not just basically pull the rug out from the support that they were receiving this year. So it's a start where we have a lot of work to do, but that is my goal ultimately, is to bring this same level of support to the middle school.
That's great, because just to sort of voice a little bit of a concern is, I feel like the only real great assessments that we have are MCAS.
Oh, we use iReady at the
Okay.
middle school.
Okay.
Sorry, I should have mentioned that.
And I just get a little bit concerned because I know that, and I'm not a teacher, so maybe this is best practice, but I always get a little worried when kids are taking like typical assessments after a unit, let's say, and they don't do well, and they get to do like a retake and a correction and a correction and a correction, and on paper, they look like they're, you know, meeting standards and they're on track, but then I go, are they real? Like, I just get a little bit worried about how kids are doing at the middle school academically right now with the pandemic, and making sure, I just love what you're doing. And
So last fall, I worked with Dr. Quirk because they had iReady, but they weren't using it universally, right? They weren't using it 3 times a year with everybody. So they did initiate that this current school year. So that was the first year that I think they did it, you know, all 3, you know, fall, winter, spring. So they have the data, and they've been using it to help support students, but now we'll be able to do it more in that collaborative approach. So they have iReady for reading. They are looking at, they're trying to figure out which universal screener they want to use in math. So they sort of piloted a couple this year, but they're making that decision now. So we're putting the pieces in place to continue to build that on.
And in terms of math, I sent over, in addition to kind of the broad 5th grade list that went over to the middle school, I also emailed Mary Beth. She and I were in contact with specific students based on the spring data meetings, which kids we felt like just could be monitored and just keep an eye on them with the transition to the middle school, and which kids there were significant concerns that still wanted to make sure that there was something ready for them in the fall when they get there.
Mr. Smaha?
Between the 3 of you, you took all my questions and all sort of my thoughts, but I'm just gonna sort of say, like, especially with what Dr. Bryson was saying, is that, you know, like, this is, like, as a teacher, like, and I know I say that all the time, but like, it really, really, like, this, when I first heard, probably 10 or 15 years ago when the data started to come in, and I was like, oh my gosh, I got really concerned about this, like, move towards data. But I've really sort of embraced it and come to understand it, and like this process is like exactly like the model that I think we need to be following. And it's just, the combination of taking a look at the data, but not saying the data is everything that matters. It's involving the teachers. So they get sort of like that open door, because, for years, a lot of classrooms have been shut doors, and nobody knows what's going on in them, and we really need to open them up. It's sort of like, you talked about carving out time for that dialogue. I can't express to you how happy I am that this is happening, how important this is for the district to really be taking like this really best possible approach to looking at data. So I'm very, very, very excited about it. One of my questions is, I think that you noted one of the areas of success was around the gen ed tutors, which are funded through ESSER. And so I don't know if this becomes a bigger question for the committee, but if that, we need to figure out a way to support, after ESSER funding goes away, that, this seems to be the thing that's working well. If we take away a piece of it, you know what I mean? That could have a real negative impact on our students. So I think as a committee, we need to really be thinking about what is that next step in terms of ESSER, when that money goes away and we don't have those tutors, or we need to find another way. My question too is is about families. If your student is in that like red to yellow area, do all those families, they're aware of that?
Yeah, so any student that's receiving intervention, tier 2 intervention, a phone call is made home to notify parents, and permission slips are sent home, but then in addition, at each progress monitoring period along the way, updates are provided to the families through a phone call typically. Any student who is yellow, classroom teachers are communicating with the parents around progress that students are making through, so it may not be, because it's really just targeted instruction in the classroom, it's not really pull-out services or anything like that. So it's more open dialogue with the parents and through parent conferences and just updates home from the teacher.
So actually, I just have two, not I'm sure the questions, but you already answered this for Mrs. Plowman, the next steps for the middle school. So that seems to be where you're going to start to direct some of your attention, which brings me to, how do you remove yourself from some of these elementary ed? And is that your hope? And you don't have to answer this right now.
So my goal this year, regardless of staffing, I would have been involved this year because I wanted there to be a real shared partnership in, that I wanted teachers to feel that administration was totally supporting this initiative, and which we are, and that I wanted to hear from them firsthand what their needs were and how, and that way I could address those needs in a timely way and all of that. So I still want to be a part of at least universal screening data meetings a few times a year, not maybe the full meetings, but be able to be visible and be a part of some of those conversations, but with the addition of the elementary literacy coordinator. So really Michelle and Melissa will be able to really co-facilitate along with principals, right? I think that was really, this year was tough because, as you know, the staffing principals jumped through hoops this year to get sub-coverage for us to be able to run these meetings. So oftentimes they were like, I gotta go cover lunch duty because we don't, So, but for the most part, they tried to be involved in these meetings on a regular basis. So hopefully we won't be running into the same issues with trying to get subs next year. Hopefully it'll get easier, but really between the principals and our elementary literacy and STEM coordinators, we should be able to manage that. I definitely want to stay involved, but I know that I can't spend the same amount of time I did this year at every meeting, but that's the plan.
I could talk about this all day, so I'm going to stop, and we can have coffee, and I'll tell you all my other thought. No, but thank you very much. Did you have something you wanted to add?
If I could, and you've all captured it so eloquently. We talk so much about using data in education, right? It's become a buzzword. It's just what people say. But through this presentation, what you were able to get, and I know you were able to get a sense of this was truly talking about data, truly looking at data carefully. I had the chance to jump into a few of these meetings in some of the different schools, and the picture that was painted, that Christine painted for you, was so it was so accurate. The engagement, the collaboration was so rich. So you should be proud, and I know you're proud, and I'm proud, and you know, the community, for those, even if they're not educators or necessarily consumers of data, know that the level of detail that was described here and was captured was truly so amazing. So thank you for those words. You use the word transformative. This is transformative for our district, and taking this step forward. Kudos to our teachers, you know, kudos to our principals. I mean, this was a heavy lift in still a really demanding year, and all the more important, clearly, for this data, and I think we all recognize that. It does you mentioned the funding needs going forward. It is something, as we think about sustaining this work, is going to be a conversation we're going to have here, along with some other positions and resources. But I just want to thank both Michelle and Christine. This could never have happened without their leadership and their commitment, so thank you so much.
Thank you. We really should do a standing ovation.
That's right,
Really
I'll
okay.
pass. I don't think it's cheesy at all.
It's a little cheesy. Thanks so much. I'm not even sure where we are. I feel like we're, I'm kidding.
was gonna say.
Transportation.
Tracy's not doing a standing ovation.
Transportation.
Timestamps.
So the
Transportation,
Yes,
yeah.
so this can be, this is I think, a quick item, but, and maybe this wasn't exactly the best title for this, so I apologize. But the essence of this, there's not something in the packet on this, but I did, you know, as we prepare to bring the summer to a close, there's lots of projects and lots of, obviously, tasks and assignments and such that I or a team need to attend to, but one of them is around start times. And so that's the nexus with transportation here, that clearly, as we know, we're marching forward, and it will be not that far. It'll be soon upon us in terms of, again, here in this room, taking a look at what modifications or adjustments to our policies relative to transportation, to our practices, and so on, that we may wish to do to get to our goal of changing start times. And so my question, I guess, ultimately for you as a committee is, you know, the level of involvement that members of the committee or representatives of the committee might wish to have. It certainly is the case that Ms. Ferretra and Mr. Ruggiero and I can go off and take a look at all of that which falls under the umbrella of transportation. And we can work on that, you know, develop some possible revisions and bring it back to you. Alternatively, if you wanted to have a member of the committee or a member or members of the committee a part of that work, you certainly can. And we would welcome that. Just a clarification, you know, a subcommittee, I'm not suggesting, although the title would suggest that, I'm not necessarily suggesting a subcommittee, but just as a clarification, subcommittee falls into a different realm according to your policy and relative to open meeting law. And so minutes, posting of agendas and the like, certainly, if that's a direction that you might wish to take, we can certainly do that. Alternatively, you have other examples where you have a member of the committee or members who are sitting on a working group. The Strategic Planning Committee is one that comes to mind. CPAC is one that can, so there's other examples. So you can go in any direction that you wish, and that, again, also could include just having the administration report back to you periodically as we dig into this and identify possible, you know, shifts or adjustments. So it's really that I just want to share with you. The intention is to get going with this work sooner than later. Maybe not in the next week or two, but sooner than later over the summer. It's a good time to start to dive into that. So I just wanted to get your sense, really, how you wanted to proceed.
Do you want me to start? To me, I mean, I don't know how else, we'll see how everyone else feels about it. It feels more like, I think it would be more productive to be a working group and to have a few members sit on that, as opposed to it being a subcommittee where it sits with us to sort of fast move that along, and I think that's just so much more complicated. Why are you laughing? Don't you think? So anyhow, got it. That's my sense of this. I think a subcommittee, I think we have a lot of subcommittees, and I don't think I would recommend adding one for this, especially where this needs to be done quickly and thoughtfully with lots more people than just three of us. So, other thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely agree, working group is the better approach. Considering I suggested that we might actually have a meeting in the middle of the summer as a committee to discuss the progress on the transportation and start time topics, I might actually be the one who has to jump and volunteer.
Volunteering yourself.
Yeah.
That's good, Mr. Turner. I'm going to put your name right here.
I would nominate Mr. Finley as well, but.
I second Mr. Turner's involvement.
But the other side of that is alternatively, it could also be a connection to the newish Finance and Budget Committee, because there could be direct impacts, but maybe it's just an interlock with that subcommittee, because to the extent that this does drive that topic, that could be, and since I'm on that subcommittee, maybe I am that point.
Sure. That's totally fine.
Is anyone else interested in serving on this working group?
Oh, but as a member of the Budget Subcommittee, I'm happy to appoint him as our representative.
Mr. Turner?
I think I've been
You
delegated.
have been, yes.
Very good.
All right, are you good with that?
Good with that, thank you.
Anyone else want to jump on, or you're all set? You're all good? We're all in a lot of committees, so we're just, when your volunteer job becomes your full-time job, right?
Thank you.
Okay,
That's
perfect.
great.
Thanks, everyone. I'm actually, if it's okay with the committee, I try to do this when we set the agenda, yeah. I wanted to move the SEL update. So we have Christine and Aaron here, so I figured we would let them.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Okay. And then we'll go back and finish with the evaluation and then the equity audit update. Hello and welcome. Thanks for being here.
So, you know, as Christine and Aaron, thank you so much for being here, is somewhat connected to the previous presentation around data. You know, we're bringing this year to a close. A lot of activity obviously has ensued, hence why it seemed like a great opportunity to bring you up to speed on all of the work around data and the analysis of data. And in a different way, the thought here to provide you with an update on Panorama, Care Solus, also a commitment through funding, through the ESSER funding and others, as part of our effort as a school district with the school committee's support on trying to aid recovery, trying to support our students, in some cases certainly our staff, as we continue to make our way out of the pandemic. And so with that, the thought before we move into summer recess, to provide an update on these topics. So thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Brand. Thank you, school committee, for having us tonight to provide a brief update of the SEL efforts and the roles and goals of the social emotional specialists for this year. So as Dr. Brand said, we'll be talking a little bit about Care Solus, which we adopted this year, Panorama, and kind of the roles and goals that Erin fulfilled throughout the year. Whoops, here we go. So Erin has been supporting a tremendous amount of support at the Wildwood, Woburn Street North Middle School and High School. We also welcome Sarah Jean Phillips. We had an open position. She'll be starting with us July 1st, and she'll be servicing the Boutwell Shawsheen West Middle School and High School. She has over 14 years experience in the Pelham, New Hampshire Public Schools. She's currently in a leadership program at Southern New Hampshire University. She provides counseling services in the areas of academic, social emotional, and college career planning. She maintains consistent relationships with students, staff, and families, and she's created and implemented presentations to students and parents on social emotional learning. She's has a lot of data initiatives that she did for SEL, and including the advisory at the high school level. So we're really excited to welcome her next week. So for this year, there were many opportunities that Erin had in the schools to really bring social emotional learning alive for our families, our students, and our staff. She started the year with a back to school night, really kind of easing the anxiety of families in a new year. We didn't know if we were starting with mass at the beginning of the year, and really kind of creating a lot of information from our wellness survey to really find out some information about how families were kind of dealing with the back to school and what issues were arising for them. It was a tremendous outpouring to all the schools for the coffee chats that Erin did. So she went to all the buildings and provided an open time just for staff to come in and introduce themselves, really kind of hear from them what their areas were that they needed some support with this year. offered Wilmington University for Parents, a wellness series for mental health, supporting youth with depression. She was really adamant about kind of helping to plan that event and bringing in an outside speaker. What was amazing to see, and always our favorite, is the Student Service Learning Project, and Erin really presented to the high school students in this room about self-care and what that looks like. It was really interactive, and I observed her in that presentation, and she did a fabulous job. A lot of professional development this year for coaching and staff around our new initiatives, so just being a support, really seeing her in the schools, really working closely and with staff in the classrooms, and providing professional development on behavior and different social emotional learning topics. A big deal this year was a social emotional learning panorama implementation and overview, and really looking at that data, trying to improve some interventions and support staff with that. She was a member at all the schools for the PBAS team, so really providing structure and building up culture in a year that was still difficult coming in for staff and students and kind of re-entering and what those rules look like. Constant ongoing family outreach. I think this is Erin's strength, and she did a wonderful job. I know I'm giving her a ton of praise, but she was amazing this year, really kind of individually supporting students, and especially doing some small group work, primarily at the middle school with students to provide kind of that ongoing emotional support. Just going to. So when we look at Panorama this year, we really looked at, for us, our data was really around Tier 1. What did it look like for our staff to really get used to the platform? It was a lot. It was detailed. There's a lot of different great tools in there. There's a playbook. There's lesson plans. So we really took this year to have teachers kind of look at the data, have some SMART goals, and really kind of get familiar with the platform. We're hoping to get to where Christine and Michelle were and really involve our teachers in some of that common planning time and really dive deep. The administrators did a nice job too with kind of talking about the data at staff meetings, in our instructional support team meetings. So we really want to increase those efforts next year. But we did implement a survey in the spring. That was our initial one. And then this year we did a survey twice this year, in the fall and in the spring. So the next few slides, we're just going to review that data. And I'll have Erin take over.
Well, thank you, Christine, for your kind words. This has been a wonderful opportunity this year, and there's been tremendous teaming. Of course, one of the initiatives, Panorama, which will certainly, there's new, goals and hopefully updates as the next year goes on with regard to Panorama. So as a district, we were pleased with the overall participation and the implementation in our fall survey, with 92.5% of teachers completing the SEL Teacher Perception Survey for their students in grades pre-K through 3, and 80.4% of students completing the Student Competency and Well-being measures in grades 4 through 12. For the spring survey, 81.2% of the teachers completed the SEL Teacher Perception Survey for their students in grades pre-K through 3, and 60.4% of students completed the Student Competency and Well-being measures in grades 4 through 12. The high school seniors had graduated prior to the survey being implemented, which speaks to the discrepancy in the final scores of 60.4%. Here are the district results of the teacher perception of students grades pre-K through 3. The survey topic is on the left and the results are on the right. In green, we've identified as a district that teachers rated their students to have stronger emotion regulation skills, with social perspective taking skills to be noted as an area for growth. Considering the age level of the students, they are still developing these important social skills, and all these areas will be a continued focus for improvement. These are the district results. Oops.
This spring.
This spring.
Sorry.
That's okay. These are the district results of the SEL Student Competency and Wellbeing for grades 4 through 5. The survey topic is on the left, and the percentage results in the middle with the percentile scores for national comparison on the right. The percentage score means percent favorable. A high score means that students report feeling more positively about a specific topic, while a low score means that they don't feel as positively about it. The percentile score reflects national benchmarks to allow districts to compare to a national data set. We were pleased to see that the fall 2021, 90% of students selected a positive answer choice for feeling a sense of belonging, and in the spring, it shows that it is still an area of strength for the district. We customized our survey to include the sense of belonging topic. Therefore, we did not receive the national benchmarks for this competency. While emotional regulation is an area for growth as a district, we fall in the 80th to 99th percentile compared to national averages. Before you are the district results of the SEL Student Competency and Wellbeing for grades 6 through 12. The survey topic is on the left, and the percentage results is in the middle, with the percentile scores for national comparisons on the right. Self-management, highlighted in green, indicates a positive answer choice for students. We saw an increase of the percent of our students that rated themselves favorable for self-efficacy, which relates to confidence. From the fall to the spring, the district saw an increase in this area despite being below the national average. This continues to be an area of focus for the district.
So part of our district's, separate from Panorama, our district strategic plan was to create and administer and understand a staff survey, so we could understand how staff felt about social emotional learning. Are they incorporating it into their daily routine? What does that look like? So on the left are the pre-survey results that we did right before the pandemic in January of 2020, and then just more recently in June. So overall, staff that completed this survey believe that social emotional learning competencies are related to student academic success. And a greater amount of staff are implementing SEL competencies more routinely. So we saw an increase in the amount of staff that understand and implement SEL competencies in their role, which was nice to see. And furthermore, there have been a dramatic increase in the amount of staff that have participated in SEL PD. So overall, we've seen an increase with staff understanding of social emotional learning, which was nice to see. I think naturally with the pandemic, there was just so much PD around SEL and how to incorporate that into the school day. So that was just a nice kind of pre and post survey that we gave, and that was through the Behavioral Health Task Force created that survey. So Care Solace has been a valuable resource this year to our district. We didn't know what to expect at the beginning of the year, and it really has been a tremendous resource for the district clinical staff, the nursing staff, to refer students and families to connect to community-based care, mental health care. So staff members and families also had a separate portal that they were able to anonymously search to get help for themselves or their families. We provided a training to all our administrators at the beginning of the year, the clinical staff and the nursing staff. Staff really has had an overall positive experience. I just put a quote up there that actually a nurse shared with us that she was, working with a student that, was on a wait list for a while. And after, she had a first appointment within 3 weeks with Care Solace. So that was nice to hear, just a nurse randomly send this email. Thought we would include it here. The family feedback, and I know Erin had a lot of the referrals this year, have been positive to really kind of take away that piece of connecting and calling and emailing, just providing a care coordinator for the family just was a valuable resource. Care Solace really, so I think it really afforded the families an opportunity to connect them to care. They did provide us with monthly utilization reports, so I'll go into a little bit about what that looks like. It might be hard to see some of this, but so basically, how are we utilizing Care Solace on a monthly basis? And the key indicators are on the left. So we had 1,507 inbound interactions. So that is all phone calls, emails, text messages, video chats received by their care companions from community members. We had 9,448 communications saved. So that's really internally from Care Solace to coordinate care and help find care for families. We had 92 warm handoffs. So that's really from our clinical staff and our nursing staff that provided those initial phone calls to Care Solace. We had 22 family-initiated cases, so that's the total number of community members who contacted Care Solace directly. And for us, I think this is a great number. We had 32 total appointments into care. So a care companion spoke to a community member, and then they confirmed that they had booked an appointment. So that was nice to see. Overall, we had 79 anonymous searches. So that's all completed searches through a Care Match portal, which is the self-serve portal. So if someone had a concern and they wanted to go on themselves and they didn't want to work with a care companion, they would go on, fill out the questionnaire, and use our district link, and could get attached to care pretty easily with anonymously, I should say. So if you look down below, it's very hard to see, but with regards to the referrals, individuals primarily sought substance abuse treatment for alcohol misuse, and about 63% sought mental health treatment for anxiety. So we really saw kind of alcohol and anxiety were the number one areas for our community. Care Solace can also break it down by demographics. So this shows you the gender, age group, and ethnicity of the people that reached out to them. Approximately 60% were female, 40% were adolescents, and 80% identified as white. It also shows at the bottom the top 10 insurances and also the top 10 providers that we were matched up with. I believe it's Trinity Care Associates was the top one. And the top providers are only for confirmed appointments. So they give this nice visual graph to us once a month. It's really nice to see the numbers kind of go up. Even from today, we were looking at it, and a couple more people got into care at the end of the month here. So just as a reminder, when summer is here, we always want to take care of our families over the summer. At any time, students, staff, or families can reach out to Care Solace. We have a customized link and a phone number that can be found here, just as a reminder. So briefly, our next steps as a district, like I said, what Christine and Michelle, their wonderful presentation was enlightening to us of what we want to do as we continue our work with Panorama. So we are going to continue the partnership for next year. We'll implement the survey again 2 times during next school year, in the fall and the spring. We will meet with school teams to kind of explore that data, support staff again in writing SMART goals at the beginning of the year. Some schools have really created their tiered interventions and what that looks like. So for instance, for social emotional learning, it might look for a sense of belonging. If a student scored that they weren't feeling kind of connected or comfortable to a school, we would do what's called like a check-in, check-out system with a staff member and really pair them up with someone to build on that connection. We will be providing ongoing PD. We're already planning for the leadership team this summer to really look at their school's data and really dig deep and drill down on their school data, and then individually what that looks like for students that might be showing up in red in some of these skills. For Care Solace, we would like to continue the partnership again for this year. It's been nice to have these grants that have awarded us this opportunity to really have access to care for families. So really kind of getting out, they provide us newsletters and different ways to get that information out to families. And like I said, that number was really nice to see that we've connected these families to care. It's better than 0. So that was promising for us. We really want to train new clinical staff, nursing staff, and administrators. We have a lot of new staff in turnover, so at the beginning of the year, we'll really be kind of focusing on training our staff in all these initiatives. Brief.
Thank you.
Just a brief overview.
That update. Are there questions, comments? Jesse.
Thank you. This is wonderful. A quick question on what I seem to have as slide number 9, which is the sort of the staff pre and post survey, where it looks like from pre-survey to post-survey, less of our staff believe that SEL competencies related to academic success, right-hand column, third bullet down.
So 70% and then 62.9
Yeah, so it
of
looks
the
like it
staff
went,
that completed it.
it decreased, which seemed sort of counterintuitive to me, unless I'm misinterpreting that. And if I'm not, do you have any thought on why that might be, or is it unclear?
Yeah, we didn't really go into describing why they felt that way. It would be in your own personal, do I feel like social emotional learning and, kind of looking at the whole child affects student outcome and growth. Some people might feel that way, other teachers might feel a little differently. I thought it was somewhat close. I believe the number of staff that filled out the survey, it was very similar in how many filled it out in January of 2020. So it is a little bit lower, but it's still, I feel like, something that staff do believe that, it's important. I think we need to build on that, and, some do it more routinely than others, and then you get to the high school level, and it might look a little bit different at that level as well.
Curious if you had seen anything.
Yeah, no, that was a good question.
The positive is that we've had more staff, a pretty drastic increase in staff participate in PD with regard to social emotional learning. So.
Go ahead.
I was trying to go at the end.
Oh, do you want to go at the end? No, I think Stephen,
Yeah.
they're all waiting for you, but,
Yeah, I figure once you go, I can say what she said.
okay, Stephen, no, you go.
But the only thing I was curious about is in grades 6 through 12 on slide 8, the self-efficacy piece, it did improve slightly, and against the national average, it improved a chunk, which says something interesting about the national piece. But can you describe more what that topic covers? And you started to, and just a little bit more detail on.
Right. So again, it relates to confidence. So the questions that students are being asked as they're grading themselves here, right, is very specific to how much students believe they can succeed in achieving academic outcomes. So their confidence level related to the material that's being taught, their understanding of classroom lessons, that type of thing.
This is fantastic. I appreciate it. I appreciate too, from working in a different district that uses Panorama as well, and not having as much professional development as I should around it, because it is an overwhelming system. So I just appreciate that you guys are, you're taking the time to sort of like get this orientation down and to really devote some PD time to it, because it can be, from what I've noticed with it, is it can be very, very helpful if you understand how to navigate it and use it. So I appreciate that. One of the things, sort of to Jesse's point about the shift downwards, I think it would also be important to note the bullet right above that, where it says 60% of staff are not currently implementing the competencies in the classroom. And that's down, it's to 35. So if only 40% were doing it before, now it's like, almost 70% of staff are doing it. So I think that's an important number to really look at too. So I think, I'm concerned as well, because if you look at the self-efficacy, like that's kind of low, like at all levels. Throughout. It's not necessarily the lowest level across, pre-K to 12, but it's on the lower end, and I think that's something that we just need to pay attention to. And I don't necessarily know how about doing that, but
I agree with you. I think we were at the beginning of the year like, wow, this is overwhelming. This is a great tool. There's so much that we can do. And then we met with Jen White to say, can you kind of help us, outline some goals for this? And we really decided we looked at self-efficacy. What can we do to really have teachers take maybe 2 lessons from the playbook, put this into their classroom practice, and then, again, drill down into individuals that might be really low and not feeling confident about themselves and learning, and how we can improve that, whether it's through a counselor or, again, some of the lessons in the playbook.
I'm just going to jump in so that Melissa can end. Well, it's funny when I think about self-efficacy and I think about the presentation we just saw, I actually think there's a lot related to differentiation in a really strong foundational way in elementary school that then leads them to feeling, if they have the tools to figure out what they need to do differently, and they have people, so I actually think that we might, I don't know, but I feel like the self-efficacy is really related to, in my mind as a teacher, to proper differentiation. So as we get stronger and better at that, I'm hoping that students will start to feel more confident in themselves, but that's not my question. My question is, I have a couple. The perception data, the percentage of students that completed it, I know you explained the difference between the 80 and the 60% who completed the survey. What I don't, why only 80%? Did they choose to do it or not choose to do it?
The district survey?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not required, it's an optional survey.
And it was I think that was a specific scheduling issue. I think that was primarily one building that didn't participate in the
You're talking about the
perception.
panorama?
Yes.
Sorry, the panorama,
sorry.
yep.
Yes.
I'm not sure what slide, this slide.
I think it was, they were scheduled, they had time to do it, and then it got changed with site visits, and so I think the window closed and they were trying to
I see.
reschedule it, and I think it just sort of fell.
Okay,
Honestly, I think looking at that data, it was really maybe 2 or 3 teachers. If they had filled it out, it would have brought it up even more, so it was just, in general, just a few teachers that weren't able to complete it. But, yeah, it was more of a scheduling conflict.
I'm just curious, thank you. My other question is about how students are being identified. You mentioned your work with like small groups at the middle school, and how does that come about? How do students engage in those small groups? Do they have to seek it? Are they identified? Does a teacher recommend it? Does a family call and ask for it? How does that happen?
No, so I think primarily it was a set of groups that were that an outside agency provided the support, and so parents had the option to sign up for their child to participate in those groups after school.
It was mass support.
Mass support,
Yeah,
thank
It was
you.
a free service that it was an added resource, but we will be looking at the panorama data to see what students are in red. They're already doing it at the middle school to see, what intervention, if a student is in red, that would need additional support, and that could include, individual counseling, small social group. So there is definitely areas to improve with that, and we're really focusing on that with the middle school program review and looking at what our counseling looks like at the middle school, the tiered supports, and how to improve at all the levels, but primarily with the groups and kind of matching.
Right.
So maybe it is a self-efficacy group that we're working on. We're going to be creative and kind of think of what we could do with the data that we have.
And then relating that to what are interventions that are age appropriate and really will sort of speak to that competency that is an area of need.
Okay.
So part of the work, and coming back to your point a little bit, it is overwhelming for classroom teachers. So Erin has already kind of looked at some of these areas and said, okay, grades pre-K through 3, here, I've already pulled out these lessons for you. So it's an overall chart, kind of a summer project that we're working on to really have teachers be able to grab something and not have to be overwhelmed by the whole system.
Thank you so much.
One last really quick one. On slide 8, the 6 through 12 grades, that's a big range, and there's so much that goes on in middle school with the kids in their age group and so much different that goes on with kids in high school. It might be interesting to see those two groups split, just to see if there's, because something could get blended by having the adolescent versus the teenage sorts of group together. It might be interesting to see those two separated in the future, just to see how much.
That's how the panorama platform works. It's
Okay.
kind of
It's that,
the way
okay.
they do it.
Their data, okay.
But we can look into that to see. I know we customized it for what our district looked like, so I believe it was grades pre-K through 2 or 1, and we wanted to do 1 through 3, get
Yep.
everyone to 3rd grade having teacher perception to make it kind of consistent. So we can look in to see if that would be something that Panorama is able to do. Because I agree, the high school looks a lot different than the middle school.
All right, Mrs. Baumann, it's your turn.
So I guess my biggest questions are related to like roles and who should be doing what, because I find that to be such an ongoing question in most schools and in most districts. It's, you know, a lot of times it's looked at as like, oh, you're the school adjustment counselor, you're the SEL person. Teachers are overwhelmed and it's hard to sort of know how to scaffold this. It's actually way easier than we kind of make it a harder thing than it actually is, I think. But I guess I am sort of still trying to understand in our district what people's roles are. So it's helpful to know like the SEL specialist and what your role was, and we did have two. What has Miss Sabella, has Lauren not been here for a while? And were those schools that she was doing, were you doing both, Erin?
Right, so yes, when Miss Sabella left, I did support those other schools, absolutely. So there was no discrepancy in support in that sense, yeah.
So I guess I'm just trying to understand, so every school building has school psychologists, but they tend to sort of hover in the sort of special ed realm and testing and servicing IEPs and just sort of wondering, are we feeling like we have a good sense of this sort of like flow chart, I guess, of like who's doing what and who's supporting who, and in sort of understanding even the sort of interventions part, 'cause I think this data is fantastic, and but then it's sort of like to what end, and our teachers, what is their perception on, are they able to even find time to do lessons and to provide these interventions? Because it's great to know that 52% of our kids are feeling confident and capable, but then to what end, right? So sort of understanding like whose role is it to provide the support? What does that support actually look like? Is it group? Is it individual counseling? Is it cultural in the building? Are there sort of building-wide initiatives that kind of target that kind of thing? And lastly, just a thought I was having about how to parlay this into, what's the big initiative, at the middle school?
Middle school.
Yes, thank
Advisory.
you. Advisory. And sort of thinking about how to team this with that kind of a thing. Is that the opportunity that we need at the middle school? I don't know, I'm really thinking about the middle school. It's just such a fragile time in development. I feel like our kids, all kids at that age, are really struggling around all of these things. But so I'd love to also see data on like how many teachers are not just administering the surveys and we're gathering the data, but how many of them are actually able and feel confident and competent at providing the intervention, because that's where it gets tricky, I think. And those are really my big areas.
The roles, we're working hard to kind of align both sides of town and what that looks like. So we have a posting out for a Woburn Street counselor to kind of mirror what it looks like at the Shawshene. So it's taking some time, but we're trying to kind of, really look at that and what it looks like. There are various roles in each building. I think the elementary level, it's a little bit more SEL focused and, natural for some of the teachers, where you come into the middle school and it might be like, okay, is the school counselor doing this, or is it a teacher, and how can we help support that, understanding. And I think the advisory, if all goes well, that will be a place that a lot of this work will happen. Some of our anti-bullying initiatives, all the SEL pieces, it's really carving out some time to do this and having teachers feeling comfortable doing that. The elementary schedule has the morning meeting piece kind of scheduled in there, so getting a little bit of this in there is our goal, but being able to interweave it throughout the day is obviously best, and having teachers feel more comfortable with that. So the roles is something we're working on. This is definitely the place of advisory, and morning meeting would be the area that we would focus this on. What else am I missing?
I mean, I think the flow chart is a really nice idea, and the principal at the Woburn Street School actually created almost a bit of a flow chart, and I would love to replicate that in the other buildings as we move forward, especially with all the staff changes. I think a huge part of sort of what I've seen one of my responsibilities being this year is really how to insert SEL into the current practices and procedures, right? So bringing, sitting on IST teams and bringing panorama data into those, into those discussions. And from there, it very well might be that there is some individual student outreach, there might be family outreach. And so another sort of thing that I think has certainly helped is really figuring out where to develop the relationships, developing the relationships with staff and teachers, and giving, individual support, for students, as well as the family outreach, so that, the community knows sort of what we're doing, why we're here, and how we can be helpful.
Got me thinking. I would really love to see, I mean, and I'm not sure if this is, I mean, I'm only seeing it from sort of a parent perspective, but I would love to see sort of us double down at the middle school for a number of reasons, but mostly because I feel like that's the first time that the students don't have their classroom teacher. And so much of that work, as a former classroom teacher, like so much of that we do is just filled with SEL, and I think that's a real shift for our children when they're only 11 and they're heading to the middle school. Now they have all these different teachers, and if I know the advisory will take care of some of that, but I really would love for us as families to see. I can see there's an emphasis. I don't feel it as a parent. Like, and I know that may not be what's happening there, but I want to be able to see it. I want to be able to feel it. I want to know that there's relationship mapping going on. I want to know that, I mean, I think, and the reason, and I have, not that the high school is so different, but what's different at the high school is there's so many extracurriculars, and there's so many athletic, and there's so many, there's just so many adults that the high school, in one way or another, interact with. And I think the middle school just doesn't have, from my parent perspective, not as a school committee member, but just doesn't have that sort of, you're not interacting with teachers in a sort of a not non-threatening. Yeah, like just a carefree way. I mean, there are some clubs, and I'm not saying there are certainly things happening, but it's not to the degree that we have here. And there's no athletics, which I think for some, so while there might be a few after-school activities, it may not always appeal to all students. So I guess I would just love as a family member and as a school committee member to just be like, we're really like putting our efforts there. Because when you're here, I'm like, oh, that's so great to know. And I don't know if, so I'm not saying that the work isn't being done, but it's just not maybe as transparent as it needs to be to the outside world, I guess, if that makes sense. So. All right.
I think a couple of things to be mindful of for the committee and the community as well too is, our commitment as a district that started before I got here, but not that far before, as I understand it, in terms of putting stock, so to speak, in Ms. Murray's position to really cultivate leadership district-wide around social emotional learning. To the best that I've been able to piece things together sort of historically, not that long ago, this is also sort of akin to the data conversation. This direction and commitment is somewhat newer for us. We've got a lot of work to go, I guess is my larger point, number one. And number two, I think that even if one wanted for a moment not to sort of discount the research that's out there that supports the intersection or nexus between the importance of SEL and academic success. If you think about these topics, and as what's striking to me is, I don't think it should be all that difficult for folks to realize that, if a student is feeling that they are a part of that school community, they have a sense of belonging. And we don't have the data to compare that nationally per se, but it's something that going forward, I would suggest is really important for us to look at. Self-efficacy. I mean, these things are absolutely so critical. We know this. Common sense tells us that around the importance for these things for academic success. So this is important work for us to continue to grow in and to take steps forward in, because if we can get this right, if we can have environments that have strong leadership and our teachers knowing how to weave in SEL into their practices, the entire district academically is only going to benefit. Our students are only going to benefit. And that is where this comes together. So we have work to do, but a good foundation. And thank you both for your leadership and your work through, through these last 12 months.
Thank you so much. All right, that brings us to am I moving back? School committee presentation, do you have that? All right, so you have received in your packets the report. Yes? And so what we did, and David, I know you're still there. Sorry, I keep forgetting to ask you if you have anything to say. I see him on the.
That's okay.
I see him on the dock, though.
I'm here.
Oh, thanks. So we actually, Mr. Smaha put together this PowerPoint for us to sort of highlight the major parts of the report. And then I'll just read just a bit of our summative comments at the end, if that's all right. And then, of course, if you have questions or concerns or anything that you're like, this isn't exactly what I was envisioning, then just let us know as we go. Sound good? All right. All right. Jay, you want to get us started here, and
Sure.
then I'll jump in?
So this is just sort of an overview of the entire evaluation process. It sort of started back in the fall of 2020, and then you can sort of see the process that we sort of went through that got us to where we are, going from the self-assessment into sort of analysis and goal setting and plan development, the implementation, the formative, the mid-cycle review, which happened about a year ago, and got us to the point now where we're at the summative evaluation. So just as sort of like if people in the community are watching, or just to make sure everybody is aware, the evaluation of a superintendent basically involves these three things. There's an overall evaluation rating, there's an assessment of the goals, and there's a rating on DESE has standards for effective administrative leadership, and you can read the goals there, included the middle school program review, the high school program review, the school start time project, and the Wildwood building project. And you can read the standards over there on the right side.
You want to keep going?
You want to go?
No, you can. I love this. This is wonderful. To just summarize our overall rating, so what we did when we sat in our committee meeting was we basically looked through every single one, we tallied it up, and then where we saw the majority basically is what we chose as the final rating. And so what we want to just point out here, obviously you're familiar with all of these bullets here, but a proficient rating as defined by DESE is the rigorous expected level of performance. And so we just wanted to make sure that you all know that, but that you know that, of course. I know this, actually, I should be talking to you. Why am I talking to him?
It's weird enough.
I don't know who to talk to. It's very weird.
Sitting over here.
And so these were under the proficient rating to be fully satisfactory. These were some of the things that came up in most of our individual evaluations. Okay. Should we wait for David? No, I'm kidding. And then next we had the superintendent goals. We did the same exact thing. We started with the Wilmington Middle School program review, and the status there was met. These were some of the, not comments, but some of the things that came up again and again. Engaged with AMLE, engaged with staff, students, and community, actionable recommendations, which hold great promise for the future of Wilmington Middle School. Next was the high school program review. The status was met. School start time goal, the status was significant progress, for obvious reasons. I hope you understand that.
I do.
There was a lot of positive comments about returning to the goal sort of after the pandemic, partnering with PAWS, that came up a couple of times. Unfortunately, no option had enough support. And then the only sort of comment that was sort of, not across the board, but mentioned a few times, was that we wished for more foresight into potential hurdles and options that would address them. So we wish that now that we're here, there had been more thought about, transportation or care, that sort of stuff, so that we didn't wind up in the position we were in. But at the same time, and you'll see sort of in our summative comments, so happy that we're now focusing on that as we move forward. And then finally, the Wildwood School Building Project, which I think we sort of twisted your arm to include, because you were like, what? But significant progress, and all positive here, just really excited about where this is headed, and just know that this is gonna be a continual goal. I'm not sure you'll add it each year, but, I mean,
Right.
maybe. And then we did have a meeting today. Is that public or not?
It is public.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Do you wanna say anything about that?
Today, we were invited into the next phase publicly at the MSBA board meeting. And so this formally starts really starts our partnership process, and activity will ensue rather quickly in terms of hiring outside help to help guide the community and the district forward in this. So, a big day, big milestone.
Big milestone.
Yeah.
That gets an ovation, you kidding me? That was exciting, and we did have some good representation there.
We did.
There were about 100, I mean, it was a large meeting, so there were 100 people, but I think I could see, obviously, Dr. Brand was there, Paul was there, I was there, Jeff Hull was there, Judy O'Connell was there, and George
Yes.
Hooper was there.
Yes.
At least. I mean,
Yes.
there may have been others, but that's, and so I think it's great that we have such great town support, and I think that's really gonna be big, important for us moving
Sure.
forward. Okay. Jay, you can take this?
Sure. So we then move into the effective administrative leadership standards. Those are developed by DESE, and the first one was instructional leadership, and the rating was proficient on that for the reasons you can see above. I think the presentations tonight, I think, really back up this culture of data-driven decision-making. So that was definitely highlighted. The standard 2 is management and operations. That was rated proficient as well. I think that one of the things that was highlighted in many people's sort of summaries here or reasoning was the presentations on the budget, clearly telling that, the story of how the budget, is connected to student success and the strategic plan.
Standard 3. Family and community engagement was rated as proficient, and these were some of the things that were mentioned. A highlight was certainly the engagement with PAWS. And then the committee, and you'll obviously read through the individual reports, but noted a need for a more comprehensive communication strategy. And I think that's sort of just across, not just from the leader, not just from central office, but sort of across the district, and continuing to work on how we communicate to families. And then finally, standard 4 was professional culture, rating was proficient. And I don't have anything else to say on that. Questions before I move? Oh, that is the last one. That is the last one. So I did want to just read, give me a sec. So you'll notice, I think David explained it last time, how we had included, Hannah, did you feel okay about that? Did that seem, okay. And so Dr. Brand will receive everyone's individual report, and then I think you've already sent out communication that you'd be happy to meet with people individually, and so I think
Yes.
that that's, a great way to kind of go through your own individual evaluation, because while we try and do our very best to sort of bring it all together, there's certainly areas, I think, that you specifically were, someone was like, oh, I really want to address this, and it may not have made it into that final evaluation, so I would encourage you to talk through that with Dr. Brand this summer. I won't read all of this, so there's sort of an overall comment. Then we do address the goals again in that summative, but I will just add our conclusion here. It has been another difficult year in K-12 education. However, strong progress was made in the district, and we have much to be proud of. Dr. Brand's leadership has been key to that progress and the success we have seen this year. Things that had to be put aside during the worst of the pandemic have been picked up again, and we are moving forward with many of our strategic priorities. Dr. Brand's ability to keep the district moving forward with the above projects amidst COVID, the closure of an entire school building, multiple leadership searches, and several union negotiations happening simultaneously, to name just a few things, has been nothing short of impressive. The school committee is confident that as he continues to build towards his goals, the district will benefit from that leadership, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
So thank you. Any questions or comments on this evaluation?
I'll just say thank you to the subcommittee for putting all of this together, particularly the PowerPoint, which was helpful, and thank you to you for your leadership. I mean, I think the the document sort of spells everything out pretty clearly, but I don't want to speak for everybody, but we appreciate your leadership, so thank you.
And I'll just say, in a note, with all the committee, the subcommittee, just with a tremendous job, and the work to upload the evidence, this was very, very helpful. So Tracy and Dr. Brand, thank you for that, because I think it just made it, I think it's so much more comprehensive because we were able to navigate things in just a much easier way.
Right.
So it was really it was a really productive meeting. We weren't searching for things, so I just want to thank you for helping us to stay organized.
Particularly somebody new to the committee, having that presented that way was essential. It really, really helped and highlighted the work that's been done throughout the year, for sure, by the entire team.
I would give Tracy the advanced for that, because she was a huge help, but that's good to know. In all seriousness, that format and structure was helpful, and it's an important part of the process, and I recognize we do an awful lot of work throughout the course of the year, and it's easy to lose sight of something that may have come before you months ago. So good feedback to know, and we'll continue with it going forward.
So what are your goals for next year? No, I'm kidding.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
I'll be texting, I'll be like,
She's
so what
like,
are you thinking of? No, I'm kidding.
Mr. Ragsdale, can you help out?
David, do you have anything to say?
I'd just like to thank the other members of the committee for just the thoughtful work that they did on their individual evaluations. The superintendent evaluation is kind of a lengthy thing to complete, but it's an important part of our responsibility as the school committee, and I'm just grateful that people take it seriously and spend a lot of time and insight into compiling their evaluations.
Thanks, David, great point. All right, we're all good?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for all your feedback.
Thank you. All right, and finally, the equity audit update, Dr. Brand.
Sure. Very briefly, in your packet, 7A, just thought that it was important, or is important rather, to keep you and members of the community aware of one of the ongoing efforts, the goals, I suppose, one of the goals that we as a district have committed to previously with the school committee's support. The memo provides an overview of some of the activity that's been happening in the background, the foreground to date, regarding surveys and the audit process that's underway. As you can see, a highlight of some of the focus groups, the review process itself, and we're on course as we understand it, and thanks to Ms. Elliott, who's also been helping with this effort to be a link with our consultant. We expect to have the report submitted to the district over the summer. And so I'm happy to take any questions, but really just to try and keep you informed.
Great, thank you. Questions? Nothing? I'm trying to stick to our timestamps now. No, I'm kidding, I'm joking. Go ahead.
I just have a couple things, and I don't expect you to answer these tonight, but things that I would love to hear a little bit more about were understanding what the focus groups entailed, maybe some sample questions, sort of an explanation around how students were chosen. I had sent some communication to our school, never got an email back. That concerned me. But so there was just, I think, a lot of questions from families around selection of students to participate in those focus groups. And then lastly, the key questions that are being identified and looked at. I'd love to know, like, how is that information being determined? So, like, for example, how is it being determined under, like, question 5, that each student is receiving high-quality instructional time? Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like it's a great question, but how does one find the answer to that question?
Through a lot of submission of a lot of documents that we've had to share.
Okay.
We've been constantly giving access to all our district documents. She scoured our website, but then every day I've got another list of things that she'd like me to send her so she can evaluate all of our handbooks, our schedules, all of that.
Who is the person doing this?
Meg Mayo Brown through the
Commonwealth.
Commonwealth Consulting Agency.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Will that person present to us, or will you present to us the findings?
Intention is for her to.
We have a meeting with her tomorrow morning, actually, so that was on my list of things to, to talk to her about. So,
Thank you.
In a similar vein to what Ms. Plowman said, but a little bit further, I understand the point of student focus groups implies a limited number, but in some ways with an equity audit, anyone who wants to, getting the feedback from them in that forum, seems appropriate. And so, the fact that there was a selection process that wasn't necessarily clear is one topic, but the fact that there was a selection process at all is a second topic. And so perhaps it might have been better to,
Yeah.
and again, right at the end of the year, I understand timing constraints and all the other things. There's 100 reasons, and many very good ones, why a focus group is the right answer. But on the other hand, maybe this is a particular topic where it's an open invitation.
I'm also, I mean, it's interesting because I think so many of us received emails that there were too many and so our kids weren't chosen, which was fine, but but funny enough, these percentages are so low. And I'm like,
that was the
No, that's out of 100.
What is
That was the parent survey.
still though,
Oh,
like, so that
right.
means parents, like, I had to send something in that said, yes, I give you permission to pull my kid. And there were so many of us got responses that our kid couldn't be pulled, but yet only 12% from, I just find, so
Can I
something
just-
doesn't seem right to me, you know?
Clarify,
Yeah,
those are those percentages, are you, like where it says 29 from WMS, 16 from,
That's out of 100.
that's
Percent of the
100%.
oh, from the whole.
breakdown of the
Yeah,
total.
that's the breakdown of the
Everyone together. So it's
386.
not 29% from the middle school.
From the middle school.
It's just of all of the respondents, of the 386 respondents,
We're 29.
29% were middle school respondents, 16% were high school respondents,
Got it.
right?
Yes,
That's how I'm
yes,
interpreting it.
I think you're correct.
And I was concerned at first, thinking,
Yeah.
we only got 6% from the, or 9% from the west. I'm like, that seems super low. But then I think
Yeah.
I think all those numbers will add up to 100.
What percent?
But
of
how
the
many
dis-
what's percentage, how many?
386 out of 20.
29% of 386 is, I don't teach math.
No, how many parents,
many
guardians,
parents?
what's the total number?
So we have 2,800 students,
the whole
50,
district?
Yeah.
approximately
It's a small percentage.
5,600.
5,600, I mean, that's a lot of families, and we have 386. That's a pretty, I think, a
That
pretty
number,
small
yeah.
percentage of that large. So that's what I mean, like,
Yeah,
it seems
that's
like
a
a
good
small,
point.
so I'm just concerned, I'm sort of like, ugh. And again, but people clearly had interest, so I'm just confused, I'm like, that's weird.
Yeah.
I don't understand if people were so interested in those, why more people didn't fill the survey, so and I guess my other thing is, I wish we could just get more respondents, is it too late? Like, I don't, I wish we could get more feedback, because I think we're gonna be missing such a
Yeah.
huge piece of the puzzle, so.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, lots of good points and questions, certainly, the response rate, I both wish were much higher. We recognize the timing of the year could be at play. We recognize that there is survey fatigue, that's no doubt real, but it
No, I
is unfortunate. I hear you, and, there was I think there was well, I'll speak for myself anyway, there was a moment in time where I thought, Jesus, should we hold this audit over until the next school year, knowing that we were sort of coming crashing down at the end of the year. It would have been another project that was sadly, put off a little bit longer, so and the student selection is something that warrants further explanation, because I didn't play out the way that, I won't say that we had hoped, quite frankly, we weren't directly involved in that, and that's not to pass the buck. But I wish that had played itself out differently.
I think that perhaps the meeting tomorrow, there can be some clarification around, because I know that when you're developing a student focus group, you don't want to have just anybody who wants to do it. You want to have representation and the correct numbers, so that you're hearing from all of the different groups.
And maybe that's what happened, I don't know.
I think, like, that's sort of the goal with a focus group versus a survey, is like everybody
Yeah.
who wants to. But I think some clarification
Sure.
definitely
Yep.
needs to be made about that. And I think, as a committee, I think we'd like to hear back about
Well, and I think as the equity sub, I think they probably want to hear back too. So I don't know if we want to somehow circle back to that subcommittee. Okay.
And maybe in the meeting tomorrow, sorry, that person can give us feedback, like, is this a good sample? Like, is this?
Is it enough?
Is
Typical.
it enough?
Yeah.
Statistically, like, significant?
Yeah.
We can certainly ask that. The one thing that I do think about when I see small numbers is usually people that have something really clear to say, take the time to respond.
Sure.
Other people that may not feel as strong in one way or another don't always respond, so at least I'm optimistic that the responses will give us some good information from that subset, but.
Or does that skew the data?
But it's, yes, but,
Yelp ratings, right?
Yeah.
People only Yelp it when they really loved it or they really
Yeah,
didn't like it.
yeah.
And
Were
people were
children,
like,
students were surveyed?
all students were surveyed,
All
every
students,
student
so
in
we
our
have every
district was
student.
surveyed, so everybody completed a full survey. This was, just more follow-up focus groups that
Okay.
was held.
Thank
So I
you.
do have data from every I shouldn't say every student in the district, grade 4 through 12, every student.
All right. Thank you. And you don't need anything else from us on
No.
that? So
No,
any
thank you.
subcommittee reports? I don't know, I feel like all I'm doing is eating. I'm like, I must have something to say, but I don't know.
David?
I mean, WEF met,
Yeah.
I sent us.
Yeah, I saw that, yep.
Um,
Nothing else to add except a
Nothing
thank
else.
you to them.
yes.
Anything else?
David? Does he have anything to say?
Oh, David? No, I don't think David. David, do you have a subcommittee report?
No,
I'd check.
All right. Anyone else? I think we're good. All right, correspondence. Do you have it? Do you want me to read it?
I do not have it.
Oh,
no.
okay, I have it. Sorry. MJ was sent a letter from the Performing Arts Department to be read at our meeting, so I will read it aloud. And then we will make sure, I'm seeing it for the first time, so we'll make sure that it is sent to all of you. I'll forward it. What's that? Oh, and to you. Yes, and to you. Dear members of the school committee, the month of June is designated as LGBTQIA+ Pride Month throughout the world. Our Performing Arts Department staff would like to take this opportunity to proudly recognize and celebrate all of our LGBTQIA+ students. We support every child's journey and encourage all to become their true selves. We would also like to thank each of you for your continuing and tireless efforts to provide safe, inclusive, and meaningful education for all of our students and their families. Thank you for never being bullied into silence and for standing up for those who are finding their voices. We are proud of you too. Sincerely, the Performing Arts Department, Wilmington Public Schools. And it's signed by all of the teachers on the left. So I'll send it to you. Thanks for bringing
Thank
that
you.
to our attention. Any other correspondence? We received a few things, I won't read through them, but we received a few emails. They've all been responded to. But I just, okay. Future school committee dates, we are not meeting in 2 weeks. Guess that's another correction. We are meeting August 24th, although we may meet actually via Zoom, but so stay tuned for that. But we're meeting in person August 24th. August 31st is the first day of school for grades 1 through 12. September 6th is the town primary. There'll be voting stations at Boutwell and Glen Road. And September 7th is the first day of school for pre-K and kindergarten. And we should probably take this opportunity to thank our teachers, staff, admin, central office, everyone for having such a productive year amidst lots of turmoil, but we did make it through, so we are grateful to everybody, our custodial staff, George Hooper and his team, everybody. So just thank you for having our buildings in such great shape and having our kids in school each day. And to our students and families, happy summer, and we hope you have some time to do good stuff and do some just downtime and relaxing and reading, of course. Summer reading. All right, anything else, my friends? No? And to all of you, thank you.
Yep.
So,
You.
we made it one more year. Thank God for Tracy.
Yes. Thank you, Tracy.
I will second that.
And I need another motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Fennelly, seconded by Mr. Smaha. All in favor? David?
let's adjourn.
You're a trooper. Thank you for sticking by us.